Okay, hi guys. As promised, I said I was going to do videos with my little tripod and my little camera from Amazon, like a little TikToker. I wanted to give you guys some videos just as some support for exam prep, for what you're doing in class. And even when I'm back from my leave, it's a good support to have for those of you that are going to be in class and missed something or just feel like maybe you want a little extra review. These videos can help you do that. So this video is going to be on figures of speech. It's your first unit of the semester. And again, it's useful for many things. It's not just for the poetry unit, it's not just for poetry responses. It's something that you will be able to find in texts for the rest of your life, is being able to understand the way these techniques are used. So I think it's really useful. I want to make sure we put some time in that. But again, for you guys specifically this year, I understand why your mentality is going to be about the provincial exam. So you need to take this video into consideration. It'll actually probably be two videos if I'm being honest. But take this video into consideration for your study. I'm going to give you guys some tips throughout, and then hopefully this just adds to your understanding. So I'm not going to lie to you. This is a little bit delayed. I don't know why my computer too. There it is. That took 45 seconds. So we might have some issues. I am not a professional at this, and I'm not getting paid extra to make videos, but we're going to try. So what are figures of speech and why do authors use them? There's a bunch of reasons. Okay, first and foremost, figures of speech, what can also be called figurative language, stylistic devices, or techniques, are all used to communicate messages in both explicit and implicit ways. So the idea is that you're manipulating the message, the thing you're trying to say, and you're either saying it literally, that's explicit, there's no doubt about what you're saying. For instance, it's a beautiful day, that's literal. Like you can't question what's being said there. Whereas implicit is something that's less obvious. It's below the surface. You got to read between the lines, consider what the person is trying to say. Why use those words? Why structure it that way? Whatever. But again, those implicit messages are usually really, really important. They're making you look for them. They're making you think about them because they're important. The second thing about figures of speech is that they're used to make the reader understand the text on a deeper level. So again, if I say, it's a beautiful day, you guys don't know when I'm filming this, you just are going to take that at face value, that it's a beautiful day, whatever. But I could then use language and I could compare it to other things. I can emphasize it by making a list of all the things that make this a beautiful day. I can do all these other things that emphasize the message so that you guys sitting at home watching this video go, oh wow, like must be a great day. She must hate being inside on this beautiful day. In fact, it isn't. It's kind of a gross day. But again, the language I'm going to use implicitly and explicitly is going to tell you it's literally and figuratively obvious that it's a beautiful day. Okay. Finally, figures of speech elevate the text. Okay. I know you guys probably, most of you don't read poetry on your own time. It's not something that, many young people do for fun anymore. But some of the greatest authors, and you'll see many of them given as examples in this presentation, some of the greatest authors, those who are revered for being the best writers, are ones that don't just say something literal. They're not just like direct, okay? The idea behind what makes great poetry is that it makes the reader or the listener, depending on the context, really have to sit and mull it over. And that process of involving the reader, of engaging them, making them emotionally and cognitively engaged, is what makes the text more impactful, right? It's something that sticks with them. You don't just hear it once and forget about it, you think about it. And so it elevates the text. It gives it that level of artistry. It gives it something that's a little bit more than just a literal message, like a literal conversation, which we forget within minutes of having it, right? So with this unit, again, as I said in the introduction, there's a few things you guys need to be able to do. First and foremost, I'm waiting for my slide to catch up with me. First and foremost, you obviously need to know these figures of speeches for your test because you will be tested on these, and that test is going to be useful to prepare you for your exam. If I was really breaking it down, as far as what you guys need to know for figures of speech, it's that you need to know how to define them. It's the first thing on our list here. And ideally, you should be able to define them in your own words. Like you should be able to, in a conversation, explain to someone what is a metaphor, what is a personification, why are they used. You should know what they do, how they're used, what they look like, okay? Now, again, I recognize that not everyone's going to be that comfortable with it, and it's okay if you have to start first with defining them off the top of your memory, verbatim, what you're seeing in the definitions on your sheet. That's totally fine as a starter, but can you really explain them if you don't understand the words in that definition, right? So start with the definition and then try and see, testing with your peers, testing with your teacher, whether that's me or a sub, making sure that you are able to explain them in your own words. And if someone tells you, you kind of got it, you're missing part of it, then go back to the drawing board. It's really important that you don't just memorize a definition, that you actually understand it, okay? Second thing is you need to be able to identify them. I should be able to throw a poem at you. I should be able to give you a list. In fact, your teacher or myself will probably do that, where it's just, here's a bunch of techniques, tell me what they are. You should be able to find out what they are and recognize their cues, what they look like, how they're structured, all that kind of stuff, okay? That's really important. And then, of course, you're going to need to do that when you're given a poem on the exam, where it's not going to tell you what's in there. It's not going to give you like a bunk. You're going to have to go in the poem and figure it out of the extensive list that I've given you, okay? Which, again, is not comprehensive. It doesn't cover all of them, but it's a pretty good list. It covers a good start. Finally, you need to be able to provide your own examples, okay? So you should test yourself. When you're done watching these, I think probably 2 videos, you should be able to go online, find online quizzes. You should be able to ask your teacher for extra poems and be able to look through them and find your own examples, okay? If you don't know what they look like, and if the 4-ish examples you're going to get through this video and your study sheet aren't sufficient to get you to understand it, then you need to practice some more. So go find more examples online, go read other poems, because that's when you're really testing yourself in the context of the writing, of finding how a metaphor is slipped in, right? And how it's hidden within the text. That's what you want to be able to do. So our first example is the simile. So the simile is probably the easiest one to identify because you're literally looking for 2 things. A simile is a figure of speech where we're taking 2 things that are not the same. Okay, they're quite dissimilar from one another, but we're comparing them, we're putting them together by using the words like or as. So that tells you off the hop, if you don't see the word like or as, it's not a simile. You already know that. It might be the next one we're about to talk about. So anytime we're talking about 2 things that are not the same and the word like or as is present, you probably have yourself a simile. So some examples here. Her smile was as bright as the sun. So a person's smile is nothing like the sun. The sun is a star. It's a flaming ball of light. It's up in the sky. Smiles are made of teeth, so they're white. Like, they're completely different, right? But you see that there's a meaning there, okay? The fact that it's bright, like it lights up her face, right? It is maybe white teeth, shiny, whatever. And like the sun can be blinding in its brightness. So you can see why that comparison is being made. And it's clearly meant to demonstrate that the smile is beautiful, right? The way that people see the sun brings beauty, beautiful days, whatever. And again, you see in this this example, as bright as the sun. So not the like, the as here. The second example, as brave as a lion. Okay, so again, we as human beings are nothing like lions. We are completely different physiologically. But again, there's this common attribute given to lions that they are brave. I think that probably comes down to the Wizard of Oz. And so comparing a person to say they're as brave as a lion is to say, wow, they're very brave. So again, that's implicit. I could have said explicitly, she's brave. That is, okay, fine, the message is there. But it means more when you say it's as brave as a lion. It gives this grandeur to the message that she's quite brave, like very brave. So there's that emphasis, there's an exaggeration there. It just makes the message come through a little bit more clearly, okay? Another example we have here, and this is from an excerpt, okay? So this is by Robert Burns, A Red, Red Rose, which was published in 1794. And the poem reads, "Oh, my love's like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love's like the melody that's sweetly played in tune." So in this poem, Burns compares his love to a red rose using like, so like a red, red rose, so not as here, which is a classic example of a simile. Now, again, why would we compare love to a red rose? Well, there's that common association to roses meaning romance. So his love is romantic, his love is beautiful like a rose, right? So it's again giving in those extra little messages by saying it's like a rose. A couple other things come to mind when you hear that. So That's why the simile is used. There's that implicit message, there's that little extra understanding of what is love is like by saying it's like a rose. So again, a simile, like or as, two things being compared. Okay. The next one we have is the metaphor. So the metaphor and the simile are doing a lot of the same things. Their methods are just a little bit different. So a metaphor directly compares two unlike things without using like or as. In fact, actually, a metaphor says one thing is the other thing. So that one can be pretty easy to identify too when you're saying someone's doing something that they can't do, or someone is something that they're clearly not. Like this is not even on my page here. If I were to say, I feel like a doormat. Okay, wait, I use the word like. That's simile. If I say, I am a doormat, well, that feels like people are walking all over me, right? I'm comparing myself to a doormat. And so I'm saying I am that thing. I'm clearly not that thing. I'm a human being. But again, a message has come through. Saying I'm a doormat means people are walking all over me like they do a doormat. So again, it's doing the same thing. You're comparing two things that are not the same, very dissimilar in nature, but you're not using the like or as. You're saying one thing is the other thing. So two examples I have here. She has a heart of gold. Clearly, she does not actually have a heart made of gold. We're saying the heart is gold, so one thing is the other thing, metaphor. But again, the message there is gold is given value, right? Gold is meant to be beautiful. And so to say that it has a heart of gold, it means that it's valuable, it is lovely, whatever. The next one is time is a thief. Okay, you'll actually see this is another different technique as well later on. But time is the thief. Well, time is a construct. It's the way that we measure our days, measure our hours. It's something that we've made up as human beings. But to say time is a thief, well, time cannot steal. Time does not have those abilities that we have. So time is not actually a thief. But in our understanding of time, we're saying that, time takes away our years, takes away people we love, takes away memories because we forget, whatever. So there is a message there by comparing two things that are not alike, time and thieves, and saying that they are the same thing. Okay. Next example that we have here is from Sonnet 18, one of my favorite sonnets from William Shakespeare. Those of you who had me in grade 10 will remember reading this one. So this one was published in his collection of sonnets in 1609. So Sonnet 18, also known as Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? This is the excerpt that I've chosen. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. So again, here the comparison is thy summer. Okay, so thy means yours, and it's saying your eternal summer. Now we're not talking about like the summer of the season of the year. It doesn't belong to any one person. But what in this poem is being talking about is that the person that William Shakespeare is addressing is being compared to a summer's day. And so they're saying their summer, what is within them, which is really saying like their life, their beauty, their youth, right? Because that's all the things that we think of with summer. We think of beautiful flowers, we think of fresh plants, fresh trees, and beautiful weather. And so we're saying that they have summer. They don't have summer within them, they have youth, they have vitality, they have energy. And so we're comparing two things that are not the same, and we're not using like or as. So that's the difference between the simile and the metaphor. Both comparisons, either like or as, or saying one thing is the other thing. Okay? Next up, we have the personification. So the personification, actually one of those examples I just gave could be a personification as well. It's a figure of speech where human qualities are given to non-human objects or abstract concepts. So anytime you're reading a poem, a short story, anything really, and you're finding that there is an animal, an object, a concept, a thing that doesn't get to think or act or do things, and they are doing things that humans can do, it's personification. Again, it's in the word, personification, person. So we're making it like a person. So one example that I put here at the bottom is the leaves danced in the wind. Now, the wind pushes leaves, right, and they move around and sway within the wind. They're not dancing. They don't consciously choose, like, I want to move my body to the beat of a song. They're not dancing. They're just moving. So again, this is under that imagery category, because if you were to close your eyes and imagine what's being said, you see that like the wind is pushing them and they're all kind of swaying, kind of like a song, kind of like a dance. And so it draws this image in your mind rather than just saying the wind is moving the leaves. Like, lame. That's too direct. It doesn't really bring much to your mind, right? The example from the previous slide, time is a thief, that's also a personification. Time is a concept. Time cannot do things, right? Time cannot choose to take or not take, right? To be a thief. So that would also be a personification. Same thing as another concept that is personified would be the expression to say opportunity is knocking at your door. It's a common idiom, and what it means is that something is there waiting for you. You just got to open the door and take it. It's literally right there waiting for you. But opportunity is not something like you can touch. It's an abstract concept, right? It's not even like something that can think, that can do and make choices. But saying opportunity is knocking at your door is saying that it's choosing to be there for you, like it's waiting for you. Clearly it isn't, but it's meant to emphasize that, like, just take action, like there's something there waiting for you. So personification again is used to draw that image or again to emphasize a message. The last example I have here is from To Autumn. This is an excerpt from John Keats that was published in 1820. So the poem reads, "Where are the songs of spring? Ay, where are they? Think not of them, thou hast thy music too." And in this excerpt, Keats personifies autumn, giving it the ability to have music and to touch plains. So we often do that with seasons, right? With weather, like we personify it like it's making choices because it feels like seasons have personalities, right? Like winter, like cold and frigid and unwelcoming. Summer, beautiful, vital, fun. Like we give these types of qualities to seasons. And so it makes sense here, like to say that autumn has a music, that it touches plains. Autumn doesn't do that, or the fall, like we would say. It doesn't choose to do that. But again, it's trying to draw in your mind this idea that there is a beauty to it, right? That if you close your eyes, like you see, the autumn has a certain energy, this music, right? What it does to the world around us. So again, personification, giving qualities to things that are human, but don't usually have those qualities. So for instance, here it's touching. We as humans can touch, right? To have music, we as humans make music. And so that's where you see the personification here. Okay. I'm going to add also, you can add to your notes. I'm not going to get into it in this video. I'd like you guys to search up what anthropomorphism is, just because it can be sometimes misconstrued for personification. So add that to your notes. It's not going to come up in poetry, but it's something that's just worth knowing. Anthropomorphism is similar to personification, but it is still different, and you're not going to find it in a poem. So search it up. The next one we have is the synecdoche. So a synecdoche is a figure of speech where the part stands for the whole or the whole stands for the part. So anytime that we're using an expression that you definitely know we're talking about more or less of a thing, you have yourself a synecdoche. So one example here on this page is boots on the ground by dawn. That's an expression commonly used in the army, and it's been taken out of that context and used elsewhere as well. But boots on the ground, we're only talking about the boot, like the piece of shoe wear, but we're not actually literally saying just the boots on the ground. That would be silly. The expression actually means the soldiers, the people wearing the boots. So you see how we're taking apart the boot to represent the whole, the person, the soldier. Okay. On the opposite end, it could be the whole that represents the part. So the expression here, Vogue wants to interview me. Well, Vogue is a magazine. Okay, it's not the whole magazine that wants to interview you, it's a person who's going to interview you from it. So here it's the whole, Vogue, that's representing the part, a person. So anytime we're talking about things in a larger sense, like that last example, or in a smaller sense, like the boots, but you know it means more, you have yourself a synecdoche. The other example I have here from, this is actually from The Three Musketeers from Alexandre Dumas, which was published in 1844. The example reads, "He shall think differently, the musketeer threatened, when he feels the point of my steel." Here the key word is steel. So point of a steel, you guys should probably, the vast majority of you hear that, right away you think, well, what does it mean to feel a point of a steel? Could be lots of things, but in many cases, and especially when you're kind of thinking of the context of Three Musketeers, pointed steel, he means his sword, right? And so here it's the steel that represents the larger object, the sword, okay? And the point even represents the sword. It's not just the beginning, it's the whole sword that they're referring to. So again, a part for a whole or a whole for a part. When you guys get quizzed on this, when you explain it in your analyses of poems, make sure that you're not just talking about one part of it. I often find students say that it's a figure of speech where the part stands for the whole, and they leave it there. You got to say that it can be both, that the whole can stand for the part as well. So it can be vice versa. Alrighty, the next one we have, see how fast this thing loads up here, is the symbol. Symbols actually you guys should be pretty comfortable with because you use them all the time. They're in signs, they're in your everyday life. Symbols are pretty much everywhere. So symbols are when something concrete is something you can touch, see, feel, like a person, an object, an image, a thing, whatever, is used to represent something that is abstract or invisible. So a concept like time, it's a concept. It's abstract. It's not something we see. It's just a thing, right? Or it can be like an idea, okay? Something that isn't that something we can pick up and touch and feel, but it's something that exists in our minds anyway. So one example here is the color white. The color white is a thing we see, right? It's all around us. I don't want to get into the whole psychological thing of we have created names of colors. I recognize that. But the color white is a color, right? We see white, we know what white is, okay? Now, white is commonly used to represent a couple things. It represents peace, right? That's why we have the expression waving the white flag, because it means like I come in peace. I want to have a truce. I don't want to fight anymore. White can also be used for purity, right? That's part of the whole tradition, or at least the westernized tradition, of wearing white on a wedding day. It's meant to implicate that this person is pure coming into their marriage, even though, again, that's a construct that maybe is not necessarily believed anymore. It's still just a tradition. So white has a meaning to it. It symbolizes something. It means something else. Same thing if I was trying to choose another color, red. Red actually can have a few different ones, and it's funny how they can be contradictory. Red could mean danger when you see that in signs, right? Red can mean stop. That's like pretty universal the world around. Red means stop, right? Green means go. Red can mean passion. That's why it's one of the main colors of Valentine's Day, right? Like the heart, like love, whatever. So think of when something means something else. That's pretty much when you have a symbol. But there has to be something concrete that you can see and touch. For instance, any type of signs when you're walking around the city. Okay, you see a sign with a plane and it's pointing, you know that means airport. Just a picture of a plane means airport. You see a cross somewhere, it represents Christianity, right? So something concrete, something you can touch, something you can feel that represents an idea, a concept, a thing that is not concrete, that can't be seen and can't be touched. The last example I have here is actually a short poem, but it's an entire poem. This is from Robert Frost, and it's called Fire and Ice. It was published in 1920. So the poem reads, "Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. But from what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if I had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice." And my screen just went off. Let me just reconnect this and see if I can keep it going. I love that poem, by the way, while this is reconnecting. So one thing that I'm going to say here, in this poem, fire represents, yes, passion, desire, love, whereas ice represents hate, distance, indifference. So it's not literal here. It's actually going to be more implicit. We're not saying some people want to die by freezing to death, some people want to burn. It's pretty morbid. He's talking about the way you live your life, about your emotions. So fire represents passion and happiness, and ice represents, being alone, solitude, being indifferent and cold to other people. Actually, what this poem is talking about is not just death by freezing or dying. That's the literal sense, if you want to take it that way. But what it's really about is how there are risks to feeling all emotions, risks to living our lives in all ways. Yeah, You might die by fire. You might get burned. Love can be a difficult thing and, it can suck sometimes. But this person is saying, I'd rather have that than the ice, rather than live in coldness, right? And alone in solitude. So it's interesting. Or sorry, I'm saying that vice versa. It's interesting how it's a different perspective, right? Would you rather die by fire or feel the burn of love? Or would you die by ice, slash, would you rather live alone but not risk being hurt? So again, it's this kind of rumination on feelings. So fire, ice represent emotions, which we can't see and touch. Emotions are just a thing that we have, right? So that is the symbol for you. Next up, okay, now we're getting into the next category, and these are sound devices. So sound devices, the best way to define them are anything that affects the way that what you're reading sounds like, right? It's going to give it a rhythm, a flow, a musicality to it, anything that makes it sound different. So the first one is alliteration. These are often referred to as like tongue twisters. I didn't put an example like that on here, but think of the common tongue twisters like Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, or she sells seashells by the seashore. Those are common figures of speech, alliterations as a figure of speech. But in poetry, you're not going to see those. Like, no one's using Peter Piper in a poem. An alliteration in a poem is meant to give it a flow by using the same consonant sound that repeats itself at the beginning of a word. So anytime there's that sound at the beginning of a word, not the end, because that's going to be rhyme, you probably have yourself an alliteration. So the example here I put is the child bounced the ball at the backyard barbecue. So obviously the sound you keep hearing is the b sound, ball, bounce, backyard barbecue. So not necessarily saying it makes it sound like a song, but it certainly gives it like a little bit of a bounce, actually. Like, you kind of go through the line and it flows a little bit more, and you read it with a little bit of pep in your step, right? So alliteration affects that sound, that initial consonant sound here. It's the B, okay? Another example I put here is from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, which was published in 1845. So you guys might have read this already, maybe in grade 11, I'm not sure. So the excerpt reads, "Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping." So you can hear a couple different uses of alliteration here. You hear the W sound, right? The weak and weary. The K sound, like the Q and C, the quaint and curious. So again, it gives it that little bit of a flow, of a follow-up to the sound. And poetry, you're going to find lots of that. Okay? So again, initial sound that repeats itself, beginning of the words, it cannot be at the end. And that is when you have an alliteration. The next one on your list should be the onomatopoeia. So onomatopoeia is when the author uses words to imitate the sound that they're describing. I'm also going to add that you might also hear people refer to sounds written out as onomatopoeia. So for instance, in comic books, like you'll see, like a bubble that says like bam, pow, whatever, which refers to a fight. That's the sound being written out, like literally a punch or someone falling, like a bang. They're writing out the sound. So some people will say that that's onomatopoeia. That's not how it's going to be used in poetry or in prose. So in the examples that you're going to see is when you're kind of feeling like the sound that's being talked about is actually how it's being written. It's very, very interesting and artistic. So you have a couple examples on your page that are really good ones. I really like the cuckoo whizzed past the buzzing bees, where you hear that z sound of like bees going by your ear. But the two examples I have here are the clock ticked loudly in the quiet room. So the clock ticked loudly in the quiet room. Like literally, that's what clocks do, like regular clocks, analog clocks. You hear the tick, tick, tick if you're really quiet as it goes through the minute, the hour, the day. And so that word of ticked is actually the sound it's making. So we're describing its actual sound. The second example here is the fireworks fizzed before exploding. So fizz, like you guys have all seen fireworks. There's some of those that pop and then they do like the little, I don't know, little swirl and they fizz. So that fizz sound, like you can almost hear certain fireworks, like you know which ones I'm describing as I'm saying that. So again, the word imitates the sound that it actually is making. The example I got here is an even better one. It's also from Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Bells. So this excerpt reads, "Oh, the bells, the bells, the bells, what a tale their terror tells of despair. How they clang and clash and roar. What a horror they outpour." So in this poem, you can see that the clang, the clash, the roar, these are all sounds that a clock or a bell is supposed to make as it rings, like as it gets hit. And so, again, if I were to ask you guys before we'd read this, what sound does a bell make? Those are words that probably would have come up. Okay, maybe less you're thinking school bells, so they're a little bit more digital, but like those old timey bells, like a church bell, like, the big massive ones like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Those types of bells, like you would think like it's like a boom, like it's a clash, it's a roar, it's loud. You would think of those types of sounds. So again, it's imitating the sound it's talking about using those adjectives. So that's onomatopoeia. I'm not going to lie to you, in really mature poetry, you're not going to see a lot of these, but it does exist. It's worth looking for. The next one, there's actually 3 different things that we need to talk about, and it is the rhyme. So everyone knows what a rhyme is. What I want to make sure first and foremost is that you don't get it mixed up with the alliteration. So alliteration is when the sound is repeated at the beginning of the words, whereas rhyme is when it's the end of the words that are sounding the same. So unlike with a regular rhyme, where one expects to see words that sound the same at the end, okay, so we'll look at some examples. An internal rhyme is a second type I want you guys to know. And these are when there are one or more words that rhyme within a single line or phrase that follows. And then finally, a rhyme scheme is a pattern of rhymes that is observable in the poem. I know that's a lot to take on. So first and foremost, you've heard the classic line, roses are red, violets are blue, I love cookies as much as I love you, whatever. So let's listen back to that example. Roses are red. That doesn't rhyme with anything yet. Nothing in roses are red sounds the same. Violets are blue. Nothing rhymes yet. Okay. I love cookies. Nothing rhymes yet. As much as I love you. Okay, so the you rhymes with blue. That is a rhyme. Okay, so it's the end of the lines and the end of the words that sound the same. If I had a rhyme within one singular line in my poem, right, a word in the middle and a word at the end, for instance, that's an internal rhyme. It's within, inside the line. And then a rhyme scheme is a pattern. That means that if there was several paragraphs in the poetry, stanzas, we call them, that had a similar pattern, like they're all the first and last line rhyme, or the first and second, and then the third and fourth rhyme, whatever. When you see that pattern comes back, you have what we call a rhyme scheme. And these are typically used by using letters to refer to the different sounds. Let's look at an example that we have here. So I chose from Macbeth by William Shakespeare, a little excerpt. Some of you guys might not know that this common expression comes from Macbeth, actually. So the poem reads, or the text reads, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble, scale of dragon, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy, maw engulf. So in this excerpt, you can see both an internal rhyme and a rhyme scheme. Okay, so for the first line, double, double, toil and trouble. So we have double and trouble that both rhyme. So that's an internal rhyme. It's 2 words within one singular line that actually have the same sound. Okay, the ubble, right? But we also have a rhyme scheme. If you look at the first and second line, and then the third and fourth line, you see there's a rhyme there too. Trouble and bubble rhyme, just as wolf and gulf rhyme. So our rhyme scheme, goodness, our rhyme scheme is A-A-B-B, right? A is that ubble sound. And because the first 2 lines have it, it goes A-A. And wolf and gulf have that ulf sound. So that would be a second sound. It's not the same as trouble or bubble. So it's B-B. Now, if our next lines had different sounds, we would add a different letter. A-A-B-B-C-C. But here we only have 4 lines to work with. So again, A rhyme is when you hear the same sounds that are at the end of words that are sounding the same. Internal rhyme is when they are within one singular line. And a rhyme scheme is a pattern that we see throughout the stanzas, the paragraphs, the lines that follow. All right. Let's hope my screen can stop doing this. The anaphora is the next one. We're almost done. I'm going to kind of cut the video soon. So the anaphora is when you can see a word or phrase, so it could be a few words, that are used at the beginning of successive lines, clauses, paragraphs, stanzas in poetry. So whenever it starts the same several times, you have an anaphora. A little bit of a mental cue or a mnemonic cue for you is I always think anaphora starts with A. So like A is the first letter. It's the beginning of the alphabet. So if there is something that is at the beginning of the lines repeated, I think beginning of alphabet, it's just a little bit of a mental trick. That's an anaphora. So one great example that you guys probably should have all studied, I know if you had me, and I think for most other teachers in the school, you will have read I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King in grade 11. I Have a Dream itself is an anaphora. He starts several little paragraphs, they're not all very long paragraphs, but still, with I have a dream, and then he follows with some things. So he'll say, I have a dream that one day my children will, and then blah, 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 blah. I have a dream that one day former slaves and former slave owners, blah, 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 blah. And so he does this several times. In this case, usually anaphora is meant to emphasize, it's meant to make a list. In that speech, for instance, he's trying to emphasize like these are not realities and that it's almost ridiculous that they're not realities because he's talking about them as their dreams, which is silly. So again, a word or several words that begin the lines, the stanzas, the clauses. Okay. Another example I have here is the poem London by William Blake, which was published in 1794. So the poem reads, in every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, and every voice, and every band, the mind-forged manacles I hear. So in this poem, you can clearly see that the first three lines begin with in every, and that makes it clear that they're trying to make a list, right? That this is extensive, that it's everywhere. So they could have just said, everywhere I hear the mind-forged fear, that people are fearful, that we create fear in our minds. Could have just said it that literally, but chose instead to say, in every man, in every infant, in every voice. So it's trying to say that it's everywhere, it's everybody. There is a fear. So again, repetition at the beginning. Here it's in every. In the other example, it's I have a dream. It has to be at the beginning of the sentence, the clause, or the paragraph. I don't want you to get this one mixed up with parallelism. I always say that there's like kind of an umbrella term for both of them. It can be a parallelism and an anaphora, but not every anaphora is a parallelism. You kind of have to know the difference. So a parallelism is the similarity of the syntactical structure. That means the structure of the sentence, of neighboring sentences, clauses, paragraphs, stanzas. So whenever you see like 5 sentences in a paragraph that are like kind of put together the same, you probably have yourself a parallelism. Like they're the same length, they read the same, they all start with the same word, whatever. That's probably a parallelism because it's meant to be a pattern. It's meant to give it a fluidity. So one example here, that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Now, I like people who say that this is an anaphora. It's not. The first line of the first part, the clause, is that. Okay, and yes, there is one small, and then after the second clause it says one giant. Sure, we're talking about two things and their sizing, right? Like one small, one giant. But it's actually a parallelism because both clauses are structured the same. So we're using the word one. Yep, that is repeated. Then we're talking about size, small. And then we're talking about the thing, step for man, right? So a step for man, a person. But then in the second clause, we say one, and then size again, giant. And instead of it being a step, it's now a leap, right? Another type of movement. And then instead of saying it's for man, one person, we're saying for mankind, a whole group of people, all of us, okay? So you notice that it's the same structure, right? We're saying kind of two of the same thing, just with a couple different words. So if you feel like there's a similarity, typically it's meant to flow, typically it's meant to give it a bit of a catch, you probably have a parallelism. But again, this is not an anaphora. The stanzas don't, or the clauses don't start with the same word. The other example I have here for you is we have seen the state of our union in the endurance of rescuers, working past exhaustion. We've seen the unfurling of flags, the lighting of candles, the giving of blood, the saying of prayers in English, Hebrew, and Arabic. This is actually an address to the nation that George W. Bush gave after 9/11. I think it was later in September 20th, 2001, where he addressed the nation saying, like, this is how we've been dealing with it. Now, here he's talking about how people have come together. Okay. Now, where is the parallelism? Well, in this passage, okay, he gives this listing, right? So we have seen blah, 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 blah. Okay. We have seen the unfurling of flags, da, 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 da. So there's a bit of an anaphora there. It's not the exact same. It's we have seen and we've seen, but the parallelism comes in the list that he's making. So we have seen the state of our union in the endurance of rescuers, working past exhaustion. He's describing them. Then he starts the next sentence. We have seen the unfurling of flags, the lighting of candles, the giving of blood, the saying of prayers. So there's this list that's being given there. So again, it's more for emphasis. He could have just literally said, we have seen the nation come together. But by choosing to structure a sentence similarly and make those lists, he's really emphasizing it, and you start to understand the extent of what he's talking about and get more details on it. So those sentences are kind of put together similarly. And the last one in this video, because I'm going to have to pause, it's getting super duper long, is the triple. So the triple is a type of parallelism where words or ideas are arranged in groups of three. It's actually super easy to identify. It's also called the rule of three. I think that's on your study sheet. So anytime you see an expression that they do it in threes, that adjectives are being listed off in threes, places are being listed off in threes, you probably have a triple. Okay, it's pretty easy. One famous example here, I came, I saw, I conquered. Comes from the Latin, veni, vidi, vici. So again, it's coming in threes. I came, I arrived, right? I saw, I conquered, I took, or whatever, took over. So again, doing it in threes. Now, this expression could be extended. Other things were probably done, but it's broken down to 3 steps, right, of what this person went through. So anytime you see a 3, the rule of 3, you have a triple. The other example I have here from the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson, or he's one of the main people who wrote it. It's mostly attributed to him, which was published on July 4th, 1776 in America. So the passage reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Where's the triple here? It's the list of what those unalienable rights are. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Now, even when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, Americans at the time, when they declared their independence from the British, had more rights than just life, liberty, and happiness. That's not the only things they were allowed. There were laws that were protecting people. But this is a good way of encompassing what were the founding fathers promising to Americans. We are promising you that you can live, like you will not be persecuted, you will not be hunted unfairly, which is kind of ironic given what we know of America. Liberty, that you will have freedom, that you have freedom to be who you want to be, do what you want to do. Again, also ironic at times. And pursuit of happiness, that this country will allow you the chance to be happy, that we will do everything in our possibilities, in our capabilities, to allow everyone the chance to live a happy life. Again, also a little bit ironic with the way America runs sometimes. But those are 3 unalienable rights, 3 things we're promising. There are way more, but he chose to encompass all of them into 3 big categories, so you have a triple. Okay? And I think I'm going to pause it there. There will be another video for the rest of the list. I know this has gotten quite long, but I hope it has been